I think what we can do is to try to actually not to be blind to everything that's going on, but we just have to work extra hard and with extra passion.
Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good midnight, depending on where and when you're listening. I'm Ben Frixell, aka Cello Ben, and you're listening to The Musical Geek. I'm here to fuse my passions as a professional cellist and a huge tech geek with awesome interviews with professionals across those fields. And I'm super excited to get to today's interview. But first, in case you're not already subscribed, I just want to let you know that you can do so at celloben.com on the sidebar or on Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast directory. And then you'll get a new episode every other Monday. But now, on with the show. So I'm so excited to introduce today's guest. She is the cellist of the world-renowned Borromeo String Quartet and one of its founding members, and is on the cello faculty at New England Conservatory in Boston, where I studied with her in graduate school. I thought it'd be great to talk to her about how her musical world has been moving to the cloud, and also the Borromeo's pioneering use of technology in performances. So it's a joy to welcome Yeesun Kim to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me, Ben.
I'm so, obviously I thought this would be great for people to listen to because of, first, what's been going on in the world and also what the Borromeo's been doing, but I also sort of selfishly wanted a chance to catch up with my old teacher. So it's great to see you and talk to you again, and I'm afraid I don't have anything prepared to play for you today, but...
I could play something for you.
Oh, yeah.
Now it's,
Have you you've still been making music, right?
Oh yeah, and actually this time has been once my mental state has calmed down after a while, I realized, sometimes actually a lot of artists in particular, they actually even look for this kind of situation where they will have a kind of self-imposed on exile so that they can kind of get back in touch with, whatever their choice of art is, to just concentrate and in my case, practicing more simply. And that's actually been a real pleasure because, basically my practicing time is not exactly hampered by all the other things that needs to be done on daily basis. So I feel much more able to, work productively and also just give myself as much time or as little time, whatever it is, that I would spend on practicing and thinking about music, learning about music. So it's actually been okay. In that regard, of course, it's, frustrating not to perform concerts. But in certain sense, I think all of us musicians or artists, that we need our own time, self-reflection, and just growing internally. And so I'm taking it as a little bit, I'm trying to look at it from that point of view. And it's when I do, it has some positive effects. So it's been all right.
I know... When I was studying with you, I occasionally got like these kind of glimpses into the wild schedule that you kept as part of obviously teaching such a huge studio, but also part of a touring quartet. I remember walked into a lesson one day when you had just tons of students lined up in that one day. I said, how are you? You said, oh, well, I'm okay, but I got in at 4 a.m. from Colorado today. And I said, how are you doing this? Like,
Yeah, right.
so
No, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, of course, I've always been a bit suspicious about this my ability to be able to multitask. Not just because I can do it doesn't mean that it's a good thing to do. And now that, things are a little different that way, my suspicion has been confirmed. I think I do way too much of that. It's not that you can't do it, but I think there is a point at which one has to be careful about how you spend your time, and do it in a way that actually makes sense, and don't run around just try to do everything all at the same time. I mean, traditionally, and now everyone does everything all at the same time, because of, the technology and whatnot. But it never used to be that, there was more of a, like, even separation between serious teachers and serious performers. I mean, they did some crossover, but it was a very different thing, because when you're playing lots of concerts, you have to be in certain frame of mind. And as I said, it's possible to switch and switch gears and try to adapt to each of those situations. But I do find that sometimes I was pushing my limits, and maybe that's something I have to learn when we get back, and try not to be too much that way.
Yeah, it's obviously this whole thing has been utterly devastating for a lot of people, and probably for us too in many ways. But it's good for those who are able to, when they can find at least a small silver lining in this, and
Yep.
find something positive that comes out of it.
Yep.
Obviously, I say that not to diminish the struggles that a lot of people have faced, but
Of course.
I know it's definitely caused a lot of adjustment for everybody, and has required a lot of flexibility and resilience on the part of performers and teachers, administrations. I'm guessing, because this, in the U.S., this really got out of hand in March. And I'm guessing you went to an online teaching
Yeah.
situation.
Yep. Yeah. I went in online teaching right away, and then it's been going on ever since then. At the moment, I'm involved in the summer festival at the Heifetz Institute. But even leading up to this point, I kept teaching online. And, again, it's sort of like I found my way of doing it, so that it was you obviously are going to have barriers of what's possible from online teaching and whatnot. But I think one can be creative about it and use several different methods in getting a decent result. So, for instance, for me anyway, I find it important that I would have some kind of recorded material in the midweek from a student, and have them just send it in, so that, whatever we talked about in the previous lesson, they can practice it, have it recorded, and then I can have a little better understanding of what the sound is like. Because even with the best of intentions, the internet connectability and all that seems to constantly get in the way, during the lesson time.
Yeah.
So I'm using that method quite a bit. So and that's been actually working okay for me. So of course that actually ends up being that what used to be 1 hour lesson becomes actually longer in certain sense. But that's okay. We all have to adjust. So.
Yeah. I know when I was working with you, there were probably over 15 people in the studio. Is it still quite large?
I think last end of this semester was I think I was at 14, and next year, hopefully, if everyone returns or a hybrid system, we will have again about 14 people in the class.
So you're still keeping a very full schedule, and I know I actually wanted to ask you a little bit more of the specifics of this online teaching situation, because I've been doing it a lot too, and I'm finding that there are different things to listen for, and I'm sure it's very different at the collegiate, the graduate school level. But I'm wondering, sort of, what do you listen for differently because of the limitations that you have put on you?
Right. So, I mean, I think when we're doing internet teaching, how just because of the way setup is, I found that students are I can see them really, really close up, more close up than in real life, where usually I would have more distance and try to just kind of hear the sound that is more stereo, right? So I think. Okay, well, some of it, I guess, is guessing from my own playing experience and teaching experience. So when the sound is not quite right, then you kind of can look at the person's hands and the mechanism very carefully and very close up. And that gives me a lot of information as to what the student may have to try to address. And again, I mean, it may not have immediate effect, but I've found that actually we could work more in detail in that regard. And also, same for the student side, because I'm so close to the camera, and I think they can actually see the functions of my hands more carefully when I'm demonstrating. So that's been working actually okay in that regard. So I do use a little bit more the visual element, a little bit more than I might. And then it's things like, dynamics. I've given up on dynamics at this point. It's just all one thing. But, just knowing what it basically sounds like, I would, again, using my visual cue, if I see that certain passage has to be played softer, but the person is using inappropriate vibrato or bow speed, or contact point is not in the right place, I would just use my visual cue to recommend that try to do it some other parts and different types of vibrato and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So do you find that it because of the limitations of that medium and the fact that things get compressed when they're going over the internet, do you find that you have a difference in your own playing, in that you sort of find yourself needing to think more about exaggeration of gestures when you're demonstrating, or
when I'm demonstrating? I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that. Do you find that to be the case?
Yeah, definitely. And I've appreciated it in some regards. Just because sometimes when for me, it simulates sort of the experience on a large concert stage. Because there, I have to be getting nuances to the back of the hall. And when I'm on Zoom, I have to be getting nuances to, in my case, usually somebody in Colombia. And, because the system just like compresses it and makes it harder to hear those details, it sort of forces me to be more deliberate in what I'm putting across.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I guess I have to agree with that. I mean, I would have used the word specific rather than exaggerated, but I think it's where actually I do think what you're saying is very true. I mean, I do find that things have to be very, very specific in terms of how you're getting the actual content of the information. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I agree with what you said about it, about, sort of using the eyes as well as the ears, because it's got to be like that synthesis of those two things, because you don't know which one is going to fail you in the moment.
Exactly.
Because sometimes, you'll be listening to a phrase and let's say they're playing Schumann concerto because the audio just freezes, and then
right, or it speeds up and it's not the video and audio are not even in sync, and this is, I guess, why I find it absolutely crucial that I get that midweek recording, even if it's just recorded on iPhone and sent over. It's still better than the interruptions that we may be experiencing or the delays. I mean, we can't do anything about that. I mean, we've boosted up everything we could boost up, but it's still occasionally, and it has to be both parties, obviously. I could have great internet connection, but if the student doesn't have fantastic one, it's not going to work. So it's definitely limiting, but I think it's doable, and I think it's also very important that. I'm very happy with some of the students that I am continuing the sessions with over the summer, and it's good for both me and them.
Yeah, it's.
I really enjoy it.
Yeah, me too. It gives you something to do, for one thing, and then it also just, because if you can't leave the house and you just kind of stuck, it's nice to have something in terms of a concrete schedule.
That and also, when we're playing, practicing, teaching, playing for someone, it's like that's probably the times that we are most concentrated in what we're doing mentally and physically. I mean, also we are very used to doing that, and it's a very special thing, like you can be doing several other things casually, but when you're playing, you have to focus. Otherwise, there isn't. You have to connect in every facility and every possible way in order to just play an instrument. So it's very therapeutic in that sense too.
Yeah, I like the word connect there too, because that's sort of, I think, that's one of the chief reasons why we play music in the first place. Yep. And this is sort of our bridge to the outside world when the rest of them are sort of burned for the time being.
Yeah.
And
yes, we are very lucky.
We are. I've seen some posts going around on Facebook, I think, about, has the Borromeo been doing like some socially distanced rehearsals?
Yeah. We actually, I think it's on the 21st. There will be a release from Tanglewood Music Festival. They're doing few online stuff. Yeah. So we were actually asked. We were going to be doing that, in real life, but didn't work out. And they wanted to keep this one, so we will play some. But also, there's a lecture part where Nick will be talking about Beethoven manuscripts and stuff.
Really? Well, I'm part of Tanglewood this summer, so I
21st. Yeah.
I think I need to start looking at the schedule farther than just the current week. So I would have seen you this summer.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
if everything worked out, yes.
Yeah. Yes. No,
you and the other Ben, you both would have been there.
Right. Yes. That would have been. I can't think about that.
So for that, we recorded two late Beethoven movements, Heilige Dankgesang and the Grosse Fugue. So leading up to it, I mean, we have to be very careful about how we rehearse, because we wanted to make sure that we started rehearsing earlier than we would usually for just putting two pieces together for a performance. And also we wanted to rehearse very short amount of time when we met, so we're not exposing ourselves to possible sort of chance of infection if anyone is asymptomatically sick or whatever. And we spread out our rehearsals every other day. So the time of the period of exposure was as limited as possible. So we did that for about 3 weeks, and we recorded actually at the Black Box Theater at New England Conservatory. And so it's all getting prepared as we speak, and it should be airing on the 21st.
Oh, I can't wait to watch it. I was at one of those lectures on Beethoven manuscripts in person a couple years ago.
Yeah.
That's where you and I got to play some of that fugue together.
Yes, that's right. Bach, the Contemporary Clavier. Yeah.
That sort of brings me to another question, though, about the other thing I wanted to talk to you about today, because Borromeo has been doing something that you see on the concert stage constantly nowadays is people with iPads and people with little air turn pedals and reading off of the score, or at least reading off of sheet music that they don't have to have physically there. But the Borromeo has been doing this for a long time. Before it was...
we started doing that, I guess. I think Nick started first in the 2007. And then I converted to it soon after that. But of course, there were some pianists who were using the system already before even we started using it. And our sole purpose in doing that was in order to use the entire score rather than our parts. That was what the actual attraction was. So, I would like to really encourage people, since everyone seems to be doing this now anyway, and his pedals and stuff. I have to say I get a little bit frustrated when I see people using the machine, but they're not actually, using the whole score. And I really would like to encourage that. I can't say enough how helpful that has been. For me personally and for the group as well. And that was why, it's just so obvious. Pianists, when you do any kind of chamber music with them, they have their part and they have their colleagues' parts right there. And so if it's possible for string players or the single line instrumentalists, if we can see the whole score, why would we not want to do that, And before computer days, it was difficult. I mean, you can, make a gigantic cardboard thing with the reduction of pages of scores and just lay them all out. But that's very labor intensive, right?
Yeah.
And so, but now with the computers, it's just as easy as anything, we can do.
So the fact that you moved to this electronic medium was not just for convenience of not having to carry around lots of stuff. It was you could get more information.
Yeah. I mean, convenience is never in our vocabulary, at least not me and Nick. We just don't think that way, I guess. And I have to tell you, for about first 2 years when we were using the computer, we were carrying paper music as well as a computer. Because, we were worried that, well, what if something happens to the computer and then we don't have music, So we would carry our the individual parts. So our suitcases became much more involved, not conveniently less involved and compact, and none of that.
Yeah. Well, it's always good to have a backup plan. But
yeah. But then, of course, at certain point, we realized that, wait a minute, we're all using the score. All four of us are looking at the score. If something goes wrong with one of the computers, all you have to do is just scoot the computer over and two people can share. It's no problem.
True.
Yeah. So that's when we stopped carrying the, sheet music.
I know one thing that is different that Borromeo does from most others is that the scores that you're looking at on your computers or on your iPads are not necessarily a Bärenreiter or a Breitkopf or a Durand, but oftentimes they are in the composer's hand.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it would be wrong of me to take too much credit for that because it's mostly Nick who likes to do. Nick is the first violinist of our quartet, and he's the one who is really into that stuff. And of course, we all have access to it. And when we're rehearsing, we're certainly discussing it from and off from the manuscript oftentimes. But Nick has done actually very extensive, certainly with Beethoven works. He's done rather extensive research, and he's come up with some things that is quite observant and particular to Beethoven's markings. That's that's been really quite spectacular journey for him. But we all, will always consult manuscript, knowing that manuscripts are not necessarily the final words of the composer even. I mean, they obviously sometimes go through various developments after that point in order to get But, even I'm not even sure if there is such thing as a final word from a composer, as careful as they are. Because from my experience of working with a lot of living composers, oftentimes, even though the piece has been played for many years, they generally have, they might not change the marking on the score necessarily, but they do have, they just want the music to sound convincing and good. And if the performer has a certain feeling for the music and understanding of the music, they're not that fussy about it, or they're willing to just, allow you to just interpret it the way you see it. So it's a fine balance. In other words, I mean, we should be careful, of course, to really observe the markings that's in this composer's hand, but at the same time, maybe going into the trying to understand what is the meaning of those. Why would someone mark something that way? Sort of thought behind the marking is maybe even more important thing to try to get at. It's like getting to know a person, I guess.
Well, I would say it literally is getting to know a person who, because there's always a person behind this. And
yeah.
I know what I was working with a composer once who presented me with what I thought would be the final version of the piece because I was about to go perform it. So as far as I was concerned at the time, that was the final version. But he said, no, this isn't the final version. This is just, my latest thoughts. And I'm sure he's changed it since then.
Yeah.
But I remember listening to him talk about, listening to Nick talk about the various functions of the caret accents in Beethoven.
Yeah, right.
It was really interesting to hear about, and also how some of Beethoven's nuances have not had a way to make it into the world of published music.
Yeah. I mean, some of his works with the first editions, they do still appear, but it was as if it was luxury item to try to print it that way. And I think actually after a certain point, Beethoven did give up. He realized that there's no way copyists can actually have that many different, because, it's idiosyncratic. It was just like his way of trying to nuance these various dynamics and various the articulation marks and expression marks. And I think at some point he could not insist on it anymore, and he just kind of let it go. So slightly, later editions often won't have those differentiations that you're talking about. And this is what Nick is interested in getting back to, that there actually perhaps was an intention from Beethoven to try to have these kind of different nuances in these kind of markings. And even if we don't follow every single one of them, we do need to know where they are and what they are and why they are there.
Sure. So while we're on the subject of interpretation, I'm wondering when you, and this is back to the score thing in general, but when you went to playing from scores, has it, besides probably making your life easier by letting you see what's going on all the time, has it, do you think, changed your collective interpretation of anything?
Yes, because I think sometimes, when we're rehearsing, it's, you're reacting to what you're hearing rather than when you're looking at the score while you're playing or away from playing, especially if you're actually, I guess this is what composers must feel like, they can sound it out on the piano, but basically they're hearing these relationships and these sounds in their head, So their score is representing what they're hearing inside their own heads. So when we're like studying the score ourselves away from the instrument, because we can only play one line, you're looking at the inner relationships of the parts and realize that, first of all, realizing how much they're actually interacting with each other. That it's not about, I hear something while I'm playing and just reacting to it, but they cannot, it's not a reaction thing. It's just organic matter that has to be felt as a group. And there's no such thing as, you just react to this, react to do that, just follow this line. It's not that simple. So I think looking at the score in its totality just gives you that kind of thinking ability, which, translates into hearing ability that's more complex, or I should say, not more complex, the way perhaps it was meant to be heard.
Yeah, and it's, aside from all that, it's just such a helpful layer of security too, to just be able to know exactly what's going on in your colleagues' parts.
Sure. Of course, another wonderful thing about using the score when you're learning a composition maybe that was written not long ago, you don't have you can't rely on listening to other people's recordings or something. You literally have to learn it from the score and from everything that is there. And so that just simply saves so much time because, people know exactly what's in there. And even before you can you go into any kind of interpretive differences, it's because sometimes, with kind of complex music, it's hard enough to just figure out what lines up with what. And looking at the score just makes it much, much easier to see it right away and see it and hear it right away in your head, even though maybe fingerings are not all there or whatnot, And that gives you a roadmap of what you're trying to achieve. And you see this phrase structure, sentence endings, the section breaks. All these things are so much more easier to just grasp right away if one's looking at the score.
Yeah, you mentioned recordings and how, obviously for a super new piece, there might not be one available. What about with older pieces? Do you recommend that students, when they're first learning a piece, skip the recordings at first and just come to something on their own?
Yeah. Just, I think recordings can be used differently at different stages of learning. And obviously, with the older repertoire, even if we tried, it's impossible not to have heard it somewhere, right? And also, if it helps you to be inspired hearing someone playing, and you just go, oh my goodness, I love that piece that I heard that person play. That's important to entry points. So in that way, maybe for that, just a general listening for any repertoire, any performer, any thing might be a good way, just so that you are getting more, basically getting more educated with what music is out there, right? But then when when you're actually starting to learn, I think it's really important to try to get at it from inside out as much as possible. So from by studying the score and looking at the score, playing with the score right away, even if you're just playing your part. And if piano is available, I mean, even with the pieces that you're not familiar with, just play even your own line on an instrument like piano, where it'll give you a much more solid sense of intervallic relationships. So when one is thinking about harmony and intonation, it's you have some kind of map to go with. It's not just kind of random position thing where, oh, okay, first finger on this string and then, fourth position on this fingering. It's not playing by a number. Rather than playing by number, it would be helpful to just actually hear it before even trying to play it, as much as possible. But then once you get somewhat familiarized with it, I think it's okay to listen to a couple recordings. And again, of course, we all have our favorite performers, so we tend to gravitate toward listening to our favorite performers and their way of playing and try to imitate a little bit. But I think it's good to listen to as many interpretations as possible to see, and always using at this point, one should always be using the score as one is listening to the recordings, so that you can try to make sense of, I wonder why that person decided to do that kind of timing there. It becomes, again, very detailed, refined, and specific thing that you're listening for. Yeah. And I think that does help someone to ask more questions that are relevant to the pursuit of what they're trying to get at.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I definitely understand that there's sort of some lines that you need to walk when you're first getting to know a new piece and how you want to go about it. And, obviously, especially if it's a big staple piece in the repertoire, if you're not familiar with it, it can really shape your interpretation for a very long time. Mm-hmm. We have that a lot in cello playing, even with some of the concerti, where we are sort of raised on certain recordings of certain giant pieces, and there's this sort of oral tradition, or whatever the cello equivalent would be, of these various ideas being passed down and not necessarily being in the score. And then, you go back and look at the score and you say, wait a minute. Like, I think the best example I can think of is in Nessun Dorma. Obviously not a cello piece, but if you listen to, say, Pavarotti do his incredible rendition of it, the very, very high note, the vincero, he holds it for about 2 hours.
Because he can.
I know, and it's amazing, but it's just an eighth note.
Yeah.
And then you go back, you look at the score, you say, wait a minute.
Right.
So I have one more question for you that is definitely a big one, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Obviously, there's a great deal of uncertainty around the globe right now, but especially in our country, in the U.S., and it's manifesting itself in all kinds of ways that are, quite frightening to a lot of people. And one thing that I've been hearing is that everything that's going on is going to change our field quite a lot. And if you agree with that, what do you see as the biggest things that'll change?
Well, I mean, again, maybe, depending on what side do you want to take a look at, but just being in a small scale, for me, there's been lots of attempt at trying to actually have groups play short amount of music, but using technology like a garage band and layering and all that kind of stuff in the, festival that I'm involved with right now. And it's challenging, but I do think that, for instance, having to do something like that, people are forced more to study the score more than ever before. And I just hope that something like that internally would be something that is welcomed and will never disappear. even after we go back, it's like, right. I hope that it becomes part of our system almost, where you can't live with without sort of trying to know the whole score before you get there. So, but that's just a small issue, I suppose. How is it gonna? I'm not sure if I have an answer for such a grand question. Everything is going to change, and we're going to be part of that change. And all I know, and all I would like to encourage everyone is that the people who are doing this, doing art, pursuing art, it's a passion, and it's something that everybody needs, even though they may not realize that. And I think what we can do is to try to actually not to be blind to everything that's going on, but we just have to work extra hard and with extra passion. And something's going to work out. I'm sure of that part of it. I don't know what the path will be, but it's not something, even if we don't have concerts for a while, and people say, oh well, all sorts of programs will be defunded, and maybe that might happen for a little bit. But I do think that something like art is. It's not something we can get rid of. It's part of people's spirit and soul, and it's going to be it's a requirement for us to feeling as human beings. And I think we just have to not be discouraged about what we do, and keep finding ways to stay positive and just find any way we can to try to play for people. And please also, let's play for ourselves, and it's not for a glory of applause or anything. But as I said, we've signed up to be in this because we can't help it otherwise. Yeah. So, bit of selfishness of indulging in that passion and realizing that everybody actually needs this. Maybe not on the surface right away, but we just have to persevere, and it's going to come out okay in the other end.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of wise words there, and I appreciate that you are holding out lots of hope for what we do and our futures in this field. I think that it's definitely going to force us to innovate, but that innovation has been long due, and the various events that have been going on in 2020, I think will, even though they're producing so much negative, so much that is negative, they will produce some positive things, like obviously more creative approaches to how we make music, more inclusivity in the world.
Yeah.
And we do as much as this pandemic and everything is devastating. So many we do have that to look forward to.
Yes, it's a rebirth. It's a renaissance. We're entering that period, probably.
The second renaissance.
Yes.
I love it.
Our own.
Yes.
And how lucky are we to be part of that? It's actually pretty awesome.
Yeah. So I think that is a really inspiring note to end on, and I think that we will persevere, and we will continue to make music, and we'll try our best to remain passionate. And thank you to Yeesun Kim for being an example of that, and also for joining me today. It was such a pleasure to talk to you.
It's my pleasure, Ben. Thank you
And I
for
hope,
having me.
Of course, and I hope that you and your family and all of your loved ones stay safe and healthy, and eventually, once this is all blown over and it's safe again, I would love to see you in Boston.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Yeesun Kim, everybody. Thank you so much.
Goodbye. Thank you.
I hope you all enjoyed today's episode, and I'm guessing you did because we had an awesome guest. Thank you so much for listening. And again, please subscribe at celloben.com on the sidebar, or on Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast directory. And if you'd like more Cello Ben content, head over to Instagram and or Twitter at cello_Ben. Thanks so much for listening. Stay safe and healthy as always, and I'll talk to you soon.